Do we need to take some detailed action? Well, I think we better get started. Looks like it's standing room only. Hey, Lauren, should we take those chairs from over there and maybe slide them this way? Good evening, everybody. The real party starts when we're all done tonight, so the sooner we get going, the sooner the food and the champagne will flow. You're all laughing? We do things right. Thanks for coming. This is the Travelers Rest chapter of the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation. We're the sponsors of this evening's event. And normally, when we get started, we have some reading from the scriptures. So we'll start with that.
Thank you. We usually start our meetings by reading from the journal. And 198 years ago, the Lewis and Clark expedition was wintering in beautiful North Dakota. And on February 5th, 1805, Lewis is writing in his journal, he said, "Visited today by many of the natives who brought a considerable quantity of corn in payment for the work which the blacksmith had done for them. They are peculiarly attached to a battle axe formed in a very inconvenient manner, in my opinion. It is fabricated of iron only. The blade is extremely thin, from 7 to 9 inches in length, and from 4 3/4 inches to 6 inches on its edge. From whence the sides proceed nearly in a straight line to the eye, where its width is generally not more than an inch. The eye is round and about 1 inch in diameter. The handle is seldom more than 14 inches in length, the whole weight about 1 pound. The great length of the blade of this axe, added to the small size of the handle, renders a stroke uncertain and easily avoided, while shortness of the handle must render a blow much less forcible if even well directed, and still more inconvenient as they uniformly use this instrument in action on horseback." Actually, the Lewis and Clark people have made several axes, 2 different types of axes for the men then. This one here is called a Missouri battle axe. It got the name Missouri battle axe a few years, of course, after the Lewis and Clark expedition. But the Indians needed this for breaking buffalo bone.
Mom, you see?
They also had another axe called a spontoon axe, and this was used when they were negotiating with other tribes. When the negotiations got really intense, that's when this was used. But these are the 2 axes. Now they used to make these axes and trade them to the Indians, 1 axe for 6 to 8 bushels of corn. And so that's how they got their corn that winter. So we can pass these axes around and you can take a look at them.
No negotiating.
No negotiation. Okay, then the following winter, on February 5th, 1806, the expedition is at Fort Clatsop. And Lewis, again, is writing in the journals. He said, "Fur, number 2, is next in dignity in point of size. It is much the most common species. It may be said is SAD, to constitute at least 1/2 of the timber in this neighborhood. It appears to be of the spruce kind. It rises to the height of 160 to 180 feet very commonly, and is from 4 to 6 feet in diameter, and very straight, round, and regularly tapering." Actually, what they were talking about was it was neither fir or spruce, but it was a western hemlock, and they got credit for discovering the western hemlock. If you've ever read any of the journals of Lewis and Clark, especially if you read even just one book of Lewis and Clark, why you can no longer read or write the English language, believe me. I did want to make one statement. 10 years ago, we hosted the National Convention of the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation here in Missoula. And We had, I think, 15 people, I think, there. Small number. And it was George Knapp that came up with an idea we should do two things to make the organization go. One was to develop a traveling trunk, and that's what you see here. And so up until about a year ago, we've given this thing about 25,000 people. But the other thing we had to do, George came up with, was to locate the exact location of the Lewis and Clark Travelers Rest site, see? Because if you remember, the highway department had a sign out here that clearly said the campsite was down at the mouth of Lolo Creek. But that was hard to believe, because when you look at the journals and you read the journals and you look at the map, and I got a copy of the map that Clark drew in 1805 and 1806, it clearly shows the location of the site where we actually found it. And Mr. Bergantino, who is a member of the foundation too, and is an authority on the campsites, actually helped us locate it too. And there were several people early on that helped. And there's one other individual that lives here in the community that helped quite a bit. Terry Heath. Is Terry here?
Oh, yeah.
I know she's here somewhere. Is Terry? Yeah, Terry. Terry did a lot of the early work for us on that, so I want to appreciate that. But anyway, what you see tonight, this is the result of the traveling trunk that George Knapp, mostly George Knapp, put this together. Previous to the trunk, by the way, people used to ask us to come to schools and give programs, see? And because we were the Lewis and Clark people, we were the authorities in Lewis and Clark. But before we had this trunk, the programs were so bad they never invited us back. But anyway, we're celebrating some of the things tonight that we've accomplished. So, Mike, you want to take over now?
Chuck Sundstrom is our immediate past president of the chapter. My name is Mike Wallace. I'm the current president, and I'd like to introduce the brigade if they'd all stand up. Everybody's here. Tom Lekumsky, Francis Wagon, Chuck Sundstrom, the infamous George Knapp, Richie Doyle as Captain Clark, Jennifer Wallace as Sacagawea, and there's Bruce Truitt hiding in the back. Bruce is our roving blacksmith. He made a swivel gun like Lewis and Clark had. It's actually a small cannon. And the neighborhood around the site isn't always thrilled when we do things there. Very loud. The other people we need to... Yes, Captain.
That is Pilot George Shannon.
I am the youngest member of the expedition, 18 years old. And as president of the chapter, they have informed me I don't know where I am. So, a couple other people we need to introduce tonight before we get going. The Travelers Rest chapter has been around for a long time, and we've done a lot of wonderful work in the area of Lewis and Clark and history. Finding the site, the programs Chuck has mentioned, over 25,000 people have seen the traveling trunk program that we do. That trunk is now available. You can go to the Travelers Rest site, the actual state park. It's there. You can make reservations, and they'll show you parts of the trunk. You can bring groups in. The kids at school take field trips to the state park now to learn about the local history, Native American, Lewis and Clark, early settlers. And that's all started with the ideas of members of this chapter. It was the chapter that started this whole thing. But tonight, you look around, you see these decorations and what we've done. The TRPA board, Travelers Rest Preservation Heritage Association. How many of you are here? I know Terry's here. They are the board of directors for the state park now. Dave Nelson is here somewhere. He's in the back. He brought the high definition television. I had never seen high definition television till he filmed us and then put it on the TV, and we had to go to the mall to see ourselves. That's the first time I ever had seen HD TV. And I said, I didn't know I looked so good. But that's quite the invention. Vicki Maria, where are you? Right in front. That's why I couldn't see you. She's very helpful tonight. Captain Clark, Richie Doyle, brought his maps in and is always anxious to help. Colleen Frank. And one of the local community people, the party and event planner by the name of Kathy Snook, donated her time and talents and just came in today and helped coordinate everything you see. to make it look good. She even made us hang things level. Normally we didn't do that, but she donated her time. Also, we have some folks here that I need to introduce. The executive director of the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation, Carol Bronson, is here. And Wendy Rainey, go ahead and stand up, gals. Wendy Rainey is here. They work for the foundation. They are our parent organization. How many of you have been to the Interpretive Center in Great Falls? There you go. They came to see you. It's part of what we do in cooperation with the Forest Service. There are a lot of Forest Service people here too. The Powell Ranger District. Ranger Joni Packard and Ann Schwaller are here. George and Chris Perry from the Clearwater Forest. Numerous people from around the state. Clint Blackwood was here earlier. He's the Montana State Bicentennial Coordinator. I don't know if he made it back tonight. Are you here, Clint? You bug out on us? He was here for the press conference. You had to go back already? Okay. We have some other things to cover. But first, the chapter that we are, everybody now needs to check under your chair because there are door prizes. Apparently they're taped to the bottom of your chair. So, you need to do that. Right here, that's who you have to see. She has prizes. I hope you win. Diane is an author. The ladies for the wrote numerous books about Travelers Rest and Lewis and Clark and the Bitter Road. Diane, we'll see that there's a map over here. She did that, and she happened to win. So we're not going to give you your own book, but I think one of them's up there.
Mine says I won $500.
But that's your pension. For being president for 6 years, that was 10.
We call this tree Travelers Rest.
As she passes out those, I have endeavored the last 3 weeks when the final report came in to contact the news media and make sure they're aware to get this out. And we're trying not to forget anybody. But when we found when we were going to sponsor Dan, who's one of our chapter members too, Kim, whose name is now the committee, coordinated everything you see tonight. The food. The food, there's cake for at least 100. So everybody's going to get a half a piece. All the decorations, she got the brigade to come in this afternoon, set up the tents. Everything you see, by the way, is authentic. We've done everything we can to replicate precisely Lewis and Clark, except my undershirt, it was cold tonight. So. But we need to mention that. 2 more? Oh, Mary won. Editor of the Lolo Peak News. How did you arrange that? Who's left? Oh! Pat! Now that's poetic justice. I hope this book is entitled The Old Homestead of Pat Ernie. Pat Ernie, what? I need to recognize you. I was going to do that a little later, but now that you're already standing. Many years ago, a couple of guys, not quite dressed like this, knocked on their door and said, "We think you're the owner of the land where Lewis and Clark camped." And Pat and Ernie are 2 of the most lovely people you will ever meet. When they found out, first it was, then after a while, people just started showing up at their door. "Could you show us where Lewis and Clark went potty?" So they handed out licorice. And now their home is the main office of the state park. And they've actually moved down to the Florence area, their neighbors of mine. So, good people to have. A little quick history. The Travelers Rest chapter has been around, I think, since, 1989, George? 87. That's a long time ago. And we're one of the largest chapters in the nation. We're very active. This is what we do. If you would like to join us in our quest to learn the Lewis and Clark history and to be a steward of the trail, we charge $10 a year to join us. We're not an expensive group. On the other hand, I am the national membership chair for the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation. And with the executive director sitting here and the chapter coordinator, we have the applications for the foundation too. With that, you do get a quarterly scholarly magazine. Captain Clark is holding things up for you. He's acting like Vanna. And his sword got away. But hoping to get Dan's article published. He's got a whole book for him. But we have applications for the foundation too. And you can do this on a national scale. Secondly, we would like to particularly thank Dan Hull, the archaeologist, who, what most of you don't realize, probably worked several thousand hours pro bono for those of you from Rio Linda, that means without pay, for a couple years before we had a dime to do anything. He just loved the project and did it. And that's dedication and that's community effort. All of us who have done this, we're just members of the community. We're local employees. Some of us are employers. A lot of Forest Service people seem to take this as a hobby. It's just local people. We have found the only campsite on the entire 8,000 miles, from St. Louis to Platts up and back. This is the only campsite that can be found of Lewis and Clark. And so far, yes, we know precisely this is it. There's two other places on the trail where there's physical evidence. How many have been to Pompey's Pillar out of Billings? Clark carved his name. The other is Sergeant Floyd's grave near Sioux City, Iowa. That's it. This is the only campsite that we have. You know, we talk about looking for a needle in a haystack, and if we took the first two rows here, we made a huge haystack in here and put a needle in it, I bet you in a month you guys could find that needle. One straw at a time, right? This took 9 years to give you an idea of how difficult the job this was. To give you an idea of how great a job Dan Hall did. He didn't find a needle in a haystack. He found a needle in a haystack times 12 months times 9 years. That's pretty darn good archaeological work. We have a diamond in the rough here. Okay? One thing too, before I forget, this is Gene Fairchild. He's our treasurer. This is something that the chapter has done and had made. We sell these. What's the price, Gene?
Just for the print, it's $12.50.
Just for the print, it's $12.50. This is Gene's frame. You can't have it. But these are Lewis and Clark prints that we've had done from the Traveler's Rest chapters. And that's one of the things we've done as a fundraiser, but they're absolutely fantastic to hang around in your house or your office. If you would like one of these or to join the chapter, just see Gene in the back. He's sitting back there. He's waving now. See? There he's waving. We'll have these for you too. Yes. Oh, Kim, yes. Bruce Truitt, one of our members, he plays our blacksmith. Lewis and Clark handed out peace medals. So Bruce, being the genius that he is, after the cannon, the other things he's made peace medals that say Traveler's Rest on them. And we have these beads. Now these beads each, Kim tells me, because she made this for me, are certified between 100 to 150-year-old a piece. And then we've got the Traveler's Rest Peace Medal. And you can get them at the Traveler's Rest State Park, or do we have some here tonight too? Okay, we have some here tonight too. But these are a great memento to have. I feel like a salesman. Isn't that amazing? Have I missed him? The county people, Beth Berlin is here from the Office of Planning and Grants. Bill Carey was here earlier, one of the commissioners. I don't know if he's back tonight. A number of people. Have I missed anybody? We're trying not to miss anybody here. I do have, before Dan comes up to speak, a couple letters to read, and I'm not going to read all of them. Dan, this says, I would like to congratulate you, and I'll just read the first paragraph, on the success of your research and the verification of Lewis and Clark's campsite at Traveler's Rest. I know that many individuals have spent a great deal of time and energy on this project, and your discovery is very important to the state of Montana. I appreciate all your efforts. There's two more paragraphs, but it's signed Judy Martz, Governor. I have a letter here from Senator Conrad Burns. Senate business prevents me from attending, but Mr. Daniel Hall and his staff have done an outstanding job utilizing high-tech analysis, and he goes on to give some of his thoughts. And somewhere, here it is. We have, Kelly, would you like to mention this? Are you? Kelly is here. She's the field person for Representative Dennis Freeberg. And we have a letter from the congressman. Report confirming the location of the Lewis and Clark Travelers Rest is exciting news, not just for archaeologists, historians, and Montanans, but for all who are inspired by the journey of the Corps discoveries 2 centuries ago. It is remarkable that historians, geologists, and archaeologists can take artifacts from the late 18th century and then combine knowledge with new technologies to pinpoint a specific site. Along the 8,000-mile length of the Lewis and Clark Trail, this is just the second time that physical evidence of that famous expedition has allowed the documentation of the campsite. Lewis and Clark and Corps Discovery camped here, both coming and going, and he goes on and on. A letter from Congressman Reber. Dan, here's a letter from the Stephen Ambrose family. The accomplishment of this final report for the Travelers Rest site is one Thomas Jefferson would have applauded. Here we have science and persistent effort hand in hand in the quest to solve a puzzle. Soon the site will respectfully memorialize the Corps discovery, but at the same time celebrate the virtues President Jefferson wanted to emphasize in his Empire for Liberty. Thanks to the hard work and persistence of Dan Hall and the members of the Travelers Rest chapter of the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation, visitors will learn about our connections to the past. And remember that we all leave our mark on the land. They will learn to appreciate that historical places deserve protection and stewardship. On behalf of the Ambrose family, we congratulate you on the final report and look forward to seeing the plans for the site come to fruition. Cheers, Stephanie Ambrose Tubbs. I have a note here from former Congressman Rick Hill, who was congressman when we started. He got the initial money to fund a lot of what was done. That was from an errant phone call from me. I was calling him for another reason, and he ended up coming for Lewis and Clark, and that helped out a lot. And I know he's not our congressman anymore, but I thought he should know that the efforts he put in came to fruition. So I was able to track him down and speak with him, and he wanted to congratulate particularly the Travelers Rest chapter for the grassroots effort that citizens of the state of Montana, and a special thank you to Dan Hall for what he did. And I have one more little card to read. This says, life was hard for Lewis and Clark, but every now and again, someone would get out the fiddle and make it all worse. Kind of reminds me of Lewis and Clark's evenings around the campfire. May our Lewis and Clark adventures bring you much happiness. Love, Bonnie, the Lewis and Clark widow. That's from my wife. Pat Williams, I hear you just got here. Thank you. We need to acknowledge Pat. He was there from the very beginning, and a lot of effort went into this, and I've just been handed a letter. It says, dear friends, I'm sorry I cannot be with you tonight, etc. As we all work together to build another strong tie to our own Montana history, I wish to especially thank Daniel Hall for his recent hard work in discovering the exact location of the campsite. This important evidence, along with past evidence discovered by Dr. Robert Bergantino, will greatly enhance the excitement about Lewis and Clark's famous expedition in coming years. A couple more paragraphs. Sincerely, Senator Max Baucus. I think that sums up some of the congratulatory letters for you, Dan. Tonight, it's been basically 10 years, but it took 9 years to do this. It's my privilege to introduce the best Lewis and Clark archaeologist in the world to speak on his discovery, Dan Hall. we've only just begun. One of our posters, our peace medals are engraved into it. It says, Daniel S. Hall, the Travelers Rest chapter gratefully acknowledges your dedication and archaeological expertise while locating the true Lewis and Clark Travelers Rest campsite. Hang that on your wall.
Well, it's nice to know who's responsible for the cake, and Tim, I will get you for that. After we finished our excavations in September of 2002, I stood before this organization and gave a presentation on what we had done that summer and what was ahead of us. And at the end of the evening, Francis Wyden came up to me and he said, Dan, you're still using the word the suspected location of the site. The possible location. When are you going to come out and say this is a location? Francis, I'm here to stand in front of you tonight and say this is a location of the Travelers Rest. It has been a long process. It's been 8 years since Tony Vasey crossed my door and asked me to give the chapter a hand with this project. It's hard to believe that we've come this far, but I think that's a testament to the Travelers Rest chapter. This is an organization that never ceases to amaze me at every step of the way. It doesn't matter whether there's elbow grease that needs to be applied, or there's research that needs to be done, or assistance with the excavation, attending meetings, letting people know that this is important. They're there every step of the way. And I salute you guys. I get a lot of questions from people. What's so important about Travelers Rest? Why should we care? And this is, I've thought about this question for years, and the best answer that I can come up with is that the Travelers Rest is a place of stories. And it doesn't matter what your interest is. There's a story here for you. The stories are global in their reach. The stories are intensely personal. The stories are thousands of years old. The stories, they define a sense of place. And very few places on the trail that you can say there's that much that you can talk about. But when I talk about stories, you want to talk about global politics. Meriwether Lewis is sitting over here on the banks of Lolo Creek, and he writes a 1,500-page letter to Hugh Haney, an agent of the British Northwest Company. And Haney's the intended recipient, but he's not. The letter is intended for the crown heads of Europe. And here's Meriwether Lewis on the banks of Lolo Creek, and in the finest of American tradition, he's thumbing his nose at the crown and saying, we're here, this is what we're going to do, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. That's a great story. You want to talk about stories about the geography of place. Travelers Rest is a place that's not supposed to exist. Now think about what was known about the geography of the West at the time they left. Travelers Rest shouldn't be here. This is a beautiful illustration of the reality of Western geography. During the Fort Classic winter, the captains sat down and they assimilated all the information that they had compiled on the trail. They produce a map. The captains sit down and they figure out Travelers Rest is a focal point of Western geography as they understand it. And this has huge implications for the trip home. When they get here, they separate. And this is something as a military commander you never do. You don't divide your troops in the field. And yet they did it here. And they did it again back to the geopolitical considerations. You have to check the British Empire from advancing into the Pacific Northwest. And it happens here. You want to talk about stories that are immensely personal. If you've ever cooked a hot dog on a fire, you can relate to Shields sitting there for 3 days around that fire doing nothing but gunsmithing. What were his fingers like on the evening of the 3rd day? That must have hurt. You want to talk about personal stories. Think about Goodrich and McNeil. Now, the leading medicine of the day says, take mercury. And you can walk right down here on the banks of Lolo Creek, and you can stand on the latrine, and you can just you can feel your stomach start to roll. And you can imagine what these guys went through. And I can't imagine a more personal story than what those two men suffered in 15 days. If you back up the geography a couple of thousand years, the Native Americans had figured out that this is the crossroads of Western geography long before the Europeans arrived on the North American continent. There's a confluence of trails here that spans from the Washington, Oregon coast out to the Great Plains, from the Kootenai country to the north, to the Basin and Range country to the south. This is an incredibly large piece of the North American continent, and the Native Americans figured it out. This is the crossroads. And you want to talk about stories of a sense of place. You can actually take the names that the captains applied to the plants and the animals and the people that they encountered and the places they saw, and you can sort of classify them. Which I'm sure the captains would enjoy the irony of being sorted and classifying after all the sorting and classifying that they do. An example of a type of name, the Jefferson River, the Gallatin, the Dearborn. Those are in honor of people. You can have a name that refers to an event that happened. Broad Springs on the Missouri, Cold Kill Creek on the Lola Trail. Traveler's Rest is a descriptive name. Those two words capture the essence of place. It tells us what they were doing when they were here. What were they thinking? What was the thoughts in all of the men while they're here? And it is just a great name for a place. So when people ask me what is so important about Traveler's Rest, that's the best answer that I can come up with. It is a place of stories. And like I said, it doesn't matter what your interest is, there's something here for everyone. I want to talk tonight about the results of our investigation. I want to squish this room right now about what a great thing that Dan has done. I assembled a project team, and most of them are here tonight, and you'll get a chance to meet them tonight. All I did was just go out and surround myself with the best and brightest that I could find, and then I gave them free room to work their magic. And let me tell you, these people, you're going to see their magic tonight. They really put together an impressive project, and I'm really proud to be associated with you guys. Having said that, let's go ahead and jump into our presentation. And I'm going to ask that you wait with your questions until after we're done. Then I'm going to introduce my project team, and if you have questions, and it's about an area of specialty with one of these people, that's their topic, and I'll toss the question off to them.
Microphone?
Yeah, let me get this up running first. So this, in a nutshell, is our problem that we encountered. We had a chance to visit with Dr. Wells, and he had drawn the polygon large enough so that he hoped he had captured what he thought were probably the two sites. Keep in mind, this is before the Bolton edition of the journals. He's really working off of weights, and he doesn't really have a lot of information. He did an amazingly good job, given the limited resources that he had at his hand. And that is the last day we finished our excavation. That was, like Yogi Bear says, deja vu all over again. Now the chapter, to their credit, they initiated 2 studies at the same time. They went to Bob and they said, okay, Bob, using the journals, where would you place the campsite? They came to me and they said, okay, you as a historical archaeologist, Dan, where would you locate the site? And my basis was that Lewis and Clark expedition following on a Native American trail would have camped at the Native American campsite, find the site, and Lewis and Clark's in the ball field. But Bob and I point to the same piece of ground, which is pretty good science when you've got two people that are agreeing on the same place. But because of the National Historic Landmark status, we need more. And then there are actually people in this room here tonight who were on this project. Nancy Maxim was president of the chapter. She went to the county commissioners and asked them to deny the subdivision. And the county commissioners, rightly so, said, no, we can't. Preservation law is written as federal actions, state actions. This is county subdivision of private property. The landowner graciously gave us an opportunity to go and do a quick and dirty look-see. And Bruce Truitt pulled this button out of the ground. Now, I can tell you this button was made in either Virginia or New Jersey between 1750 and 1810, and it was popular with the military. I can't tell you how it got to the banks of Willow Creek. So when this button comes out of the ground, everyone is like, oh, Lewis and Clark, and Lewis and Clark, and you have to tamp that enthusiasm and say, we need more evidence before we can point a finger. Now, we made some real basic assumptions when we put together our project team. We knew that we were going to need a large table so that everyone could sit around it. There's a lot of people that were on this project team. We also recognized right off the bat that we weren't going to find a smoking gun. We're not going to find the Jefferson Peace Medal saying this is the place. We're going to have to build our argument on what we call preponderance of evidence. All of these things added together tell us that this is the location. And the preponderance of evidence is a hard argument to make. Not everyone agrees on what exactly constitutes that threshold for preponderance. But in this case, it's pretty overwhelming. Now, there are a lot of people that deserve recognition for our project that we undertook. There's people who are not on this list. Certainly, the person who should be on that list is Pat Williams. He had the unenviable task of herding cats, and he herded cats very well. The University of Montana was absolutely wonderful to work with. We would go into the anthropology department, or the history department, or the geology department, and we would say, what's the latest thinking on this theory? What's the latest research? How do we get hold of these sources? What are these people doing? And they really came across for us. I can't say enough about the help that the University of Montana provided to this project. And then, of course, there is the chapter. And again, I'm going to dispel this myth that Dan did a great thing. These are the people that you're going to see their magic here. They did an amazing job, and I'm very proud to be associated with these people. Now, this is an aerial image of our project area, and there are a couple of things that I want you to discuss here. The first one is you see the yellow lines here. This is a grid system that Keith Bell and Morton Bailey created for us. That allows us to keep a tight control on where everything is located, whether it's the remote sensing or the excavation efforts. Keeping survey control on everything is incredibly important. You can't see because of the scale, but Kevin McCann actually dropped little red squares in there that show the actual excavation units we put in the ground. This area that you're looking at over here is the location of the latrine, and this red arc here, we'll be talking about the importance of that in a few minutes. I want to stop right here and talk for a minute about some of the mistakes that we made. And I know, hold back the gasp and the shock. And I don't care whether you're a scientist or a historian, you need to look at your data and say, did we make any mistakes that could affect our outcome? Is there something here that's going to bias our results? And sound methodology requires that you do that. And there are mistakes that we made. On the Miller property to the west, we actually got our measurements backwards and we dug a hole in the wrong spot. On the latrine, we dropped stakes in the ground everywhere that we wanted to sample after we were done excavating the feature, and we missed a stake. The surveyors came in and found the stake and surveyed its location, and we didn't collect data from there. With 218 samples, I don't think 2 more samples really would have affected the outcome. That's it. So we have a pretty good degree of confidence in what we've done. We can speak to be certain and say there are no readily apparent biases in our work. One of the people on our project team was Bill Eckerly out of Salt Lake City. Bill came out and conducted a geoarchaeological investigation. Mike was referring earlier to a needle under a haystack. One of the haystacks that we were faced with was the Native American occupation of the site. Bill's work helped to clear up that image quite a bit. What Bill is telling us is this upper terrace, if you've been to the site, you know what I speak. This landform that the house sits on is thousands of years old. When you drop down off of the terrace into this lower area down here, your landform is 200 to 300 years old. Now, as you move to the west, things are gradually beginning to grade into an older landform. Where exactly that boundary is, we're not really sure, but it's a gradual contact. Now, there were a number of things that we wanted to know with the historical research. What have other people found at other Lewis and Clark sites? The military aspect of the core discovery is huge in our interpretation of what we see here at Travelers Rest. Who was in Lolo Creek and that could be responsible for what we're seeing here on the ground? And then again, what's happened to the site since Lewis and Clark were here? These are all important questions. This is a painting done by Gustav Sohn. He was with the Stevens expedition. They were here in 1855, 1859. They were serving for a route of the Transcontinental Railroad. But the thing that I find interesting about this image is where Sohn has located the Native American trails. Now, with apologies to Clark, I've turned his map on its side. This is the same one that Chuck's got hanging on the wall here. What I want to show you is, this is the Bitterroot River here we're talking about, and then Clark's got the Native American Trail sketched in. Now up here, not at the confluence of the creek and the river, but upstream, Clark has made a notation of the Travelers Rest Camp. So we see it again on the return map. Again, the symbol for the Travelers Rest campsite is not the confluence of the creek and the river, it is upstream. Now, never in my wildest dreams did I think that we would be standing here on the banks of Lolo Creek talking about a figure from the colonial war. Von Steuben is an incredibly complex and interesting person. He just literally appears out of the blue and offers his services to Benjamin Franklin, and Franklin says, you need to go to Valley Forge, which he does. The regulations that von Steuben wrote were known as the Blue Book by the military. The Blue Book was used from the Revolutionary War until the War of 1812 and was tossed and rewritten. As I said, von Steuben is key in our interpretation of the site. Now, keep in mind, by the time the Corps left Camp de Blois, there are 2 generations, possibly 3 generations of soldiers that have gone through the training regime. They didn't make this up when they left home. This has all been drilled in. Keep in mind, West Point's already been established, and people have graduated from West Point by this time as well. Now, there are a couple of key elements in von Steuben that we looked at, and we say, okay, what is there in the rules and regulations that is going to translate into something that's on the ground? Obviously, the way that the camp is set, von Steuben is very specific in his instructions. The camp fires are to be constructed in an evenly spaced manner. From the fires, you measure out so many paces. Between the tents, there are so many paces. Between the rows of tents, there are so many paces. And when you get to the back of the camp, you measure out 300 feet, you dig a trench for the latrine. That's the purpose of the ark that I was talking about earlier in the previous image. Now, once we completed our research, and we're ready to jump into the excavations, we sat down and had a discussion of, this is what we think we see, this is what we think we know, these are the goals that we need to obtain with our excavation efforts. It was a difficult step at that point in time, but I think it was really worth going through. Now, we included volunteer assistance in the excavation, and again, the chapter came through in fine fashion. Thanks, Jack. I absolutely despise the phrase public education because it implies that the public needs to be taught, and I can tell you the chapter doesn't need to be taught anything about Lewis and Clark. So when I was talking earlier about you're going to see the magic, this is Skip's magic right here. You're looking at the raw data and the standardized data. What you're looking at here is a 20 meter by 20 meter area This is the bank of Lolo Creek. And we had theorized that Shields sitting next to Lolo Creek with that fire running for 3 days, burning hot, would produce a magnetic anomaly on the creek unlike anything else that we would see. So lo and behold, when this kicked out, we got excited almost immediately and thought, well, we need to see what's in the ground here. So we had approached this excavation. We thought we'll start here in the south, and we didn't find anything, so we moved up 1 meter and over 1 meter, dropped another excavation in the ground, up one, over one, dropped another one, and we didn't find anything. We went through the entire, all the way up to the creek bed, and we found nothing. So we called a timeout, we huddled up with archaeologists from around the country, and we discussed this, and then the general consensus was that you're looking for something that's very small. You're going to have to continue looking, and lo and behold, eventually we did find it. There is a very small fire heart here. You can see it here in this image here. So we collected charcoal from the fire, and we want to know, okay, what is the date or the time period that this fire was here? And then there was a whole host of questions that we're asking about this fire, and the results of what we found on the ground. Carbon-14 came back great. That's a pretty solid date. The next question is, this fire is really small. This magnetic anomaly is really large. Is this the cause of what we're seeing on the ground? And again, without getting into science, we ran what's called magnetic susceptibility on firecracked rock from across that area and drew a correlation. So we know that that fire is the cause of the anomaly. We know the fire is very small and it burned very hot. This is key to our interpretation of the site. So we move one bit to the south now, and we're looking at this anomaly right here. And this has captured our attention. Again, we're looking at a 20 meter by 20 meter square. Keith Belton and the survey crews had dropped rebar into the ground so that we would be able to orient ourselves. We've got an 8-inch piece of metal in the ground. We know what it is. We know exactly where it is. We can orient ourselves in the field when we're looking at this. We opened up an excavation unit, and lo and behold, there's another fire heart. And again, the carbon-14 comes back and says, okay, this is within the time period been associated with the expedition. There is, however, a problem. Roy Van Ostrin had driven his plow over this. What you're looking at here is a fence post that he had clipped off. The entire hearth had been plowed. It doesn't change the carbon-14 date, but it gives us a hard time placing it in the proper context. If this fire was by itself, it would probably be meaningless. When we start talking about the preponderance of evidence, now we're starting to see a spatial arrangement of fire hearths that's being reported from the Portage site, Great Falls. We're starting to see the fire hearths as they're being described to us by von Stuyven. So it's beginning to get a little interesting in terms of the preponderance of evidence. So then we move one grid to the east. And we had this discussion about the need to excavate. All remote sensing does is tell you that there's something in the ground that you need to try and figure out what it is. You can theorize all you want till the cows come home, but you really don't know. And again, we've got a 20 meter by 20 meter square. We've got the rebar that's up in the corner here. And this is the anomaly that we wanted to look at. And for all intents and purposes, it's a spitting image of the last one we looked at. Well, we opened up an excavation unit, and guess what? There's a wagon wheel. Obviously not Lewis and Clark, but this is a perfect illustration of why, when you conduct remote sensing investigations, you need to excavate. Because you don't know until you look what you're looking at. So now we move over to the west end of the project area. And when I told you earlier about one of the mistakes we made, this is one of the areas. This is what we're looking at here is the septic system that was installed for the subdivision. There's a standing water pipe that's used to sprinkle the backyard. In all cases, we had started in the southwest corner and then proceeded to the east. But because of the septic system, we reversed that. So when we came out, we started looking for this anomaly. We actually dug in the wrong place. Once we figured out we made a mistake, we came back and we found it. And yes, there is a fire heart there. And also keep in mind that we're in an area where the geoarchaeologists had identified to us, we're starting to grade into an older landform. And the other key piece of information to look at here is the depth. This fire hearth is at considerable depth compared to the other ones that we found. So we submit charcoal to a laboratory for carbon-14 analysis. Comes back, this is obviously not Lewis and Clark. But But that's all right. This is keeping in with what Bill Eckerly had told us about. You know, as we move to the west, we're getting into an older landform. Now we're on the east side of the project area. When we saw this data, we weren't initially too excited. In our conversations with some of the local landowners on Lolo Creek, they had told us that Lolo Creek has this history of forming ice dams, and then it would jump out of its creek, out of the bed, and then it would scour a new temporary channel, and the ice dam would break, and the creek would return to normal, leaving these channel chutes behind. You're looking at a channel chute that's running through here. This is really well defined. When we saw this, we initially weren't too excited. We thought, well, we need to move on. And it wasn't until we did the EM31 investigation. And again, back to the kudos to the geology department at the University of Montana. I went in to see Steve Sheriff, the chairman of the department, and they provide the instrument. They provide the students, and they're just like, you know, please give these people real world experience. So we bring these guys out with the EM31, and we want to play leapfrog. We've got the magnetometer and the EM31, and we were working on the west end. And this is a great story of serendipity, which is often how science advances. We want to play leapfrog on the west side of the property. Because of the overhead power lines, the telephone, the cable, the EM31 can't operate. So I just tell these guys, okay, just go to the east side, knock out a couple of grids, and by that time we'll be done underneath power lines, and we can come back to the center and continue to leapfrog. The very first grid, those guys fired up. They're like, hey, we got something. What the EM31 is telling us here, and again, I'm not going to try and get bogged down in science, but basically the two signatures that are here are telling us that someone dug a trench in Lolo Creek gravels, and they put something into it other than Lolo Creek gravels. There's a marked contrast in how electricity passes through the soil. Now, there's also, the mag is telling us that there's not a lot of magnetic properties that are involved here. But what's really key to us is that 300-foot measurement. So for obvious reasons, we need to test for the presence of mercury. We talked to the folks at Fort Platte how they did their mercury testing, what were their results. We went back to the geology department, and someday they're going to get tired of us, but we knocked on their door and said, what kind of a methodology, how do we refine our methodology so we can test for the presence of mercury? I can tell you, we tested again. We got 218 samples. This is an incredible amount of sampling. And we tested not only from the excavation units of what we found in the trench, but from across the landform. We were able to demonstrate a marked association of that mercury with what some of the more genteel people on my crew call night soil. And if you've ever excavated historic sites, you know this becomes readily apparent. Once you've seen it once, you know what it is. So we would go down 10 centimeters. We would sample. We would go down 10 centimeters. We would sample. And then when we initially found the night soil, we got really excited, but there wasn't any mercury in it, and so we were beginning to get a little confused and thought, well, something is amiss. But eventually, we started to get hits. What you're looking at here is looking down on an excavation unit and then looking at a sidewall of an excavation unit. And the dashed line represents the shape of the night soil, if you will. And the little dots represent where we sampled from. The squares represent ex situ sampling. We did duplicates, we did triplicates. We got samples that came out of the screen. We just tested this thing to death. And again, the same thing, the location of where we tested, the features, the results we got. At the end of the day, we've got a marked association of that mercury with this night soil. With all the sampling we got, we can say with a degree of confidence that, okay, here's this organic material, if you will, that's laced with mercury. The mercury is settled to the bottom. The latrine is 300 feet. So you can see where I'm going with this argument. We're building our case on a preponderance of evidence. When you look at everything as a whole, the latrine probably has more legs than anything else. And it's kind of ironic because of all the things we did, the mercury analysis was the most difficult we had in terms of getting funding. These are the 3 excavation units, and you're looking at what we saw as it was exposed. There's no rhyme or reason to the thickness or the width of it, which is probably to be expected. But again, back to Goodrich and McNeil, boy, what an intensely personal story those guys experienced. Fortunately for us. Now, the other question that goes begging with the mercury analysis, as you know, there are a lot of streams in Montana that are contaminated with mercury from mining. We need to know that question. We addressed that in the research. That's why we also sampled from the Proston landform. The question is also begging, is this a result of the historical development of the property? Now, to that end, we swept the entire with metal detectors and we collected everything that we found. We got a couple of brads from string and barbed wire. We got a piece of a sprinkler head. Pat, I think you can have that back if you want it. Our testing has done is shown us that this feature is not associated with the historical development of the property, and that's key in our interpretation. The physicist, British physicist George White once observed that you don't prove a theory, instead you disprove. So what we're doing all the time here in this investigation is trying to disprove what could be an explanation for this. Now we're back to the central fire. This thing pops out of the ground. Somebody's sitting next to the fire that we've uncovered. They're melting lead. And there are a lot of things that this lead is going to tell us. We submitted a sample to Cambridge, Massachusetts for lead isotope analysis. And briefly, there are 4 isotopes of lead. They appear in various ratios. Those ratios are a unique signature. Geologists had originally hoped that somehow they could use this signature of the ratios to address the age of the outcrop. That's the first thing that geologists ask when they go to an outcrop is, how old is this thing? Instead, the geologists were asking the wrong question. The better question is, where did this come from? We built a table of all the isotope values from as many mining districts, mining sites as we could find. We started to compare it to what we had found here at Travelers Rest. And here we are, and here's Olliville, Kentucky. And as we move through the isotopes, it becomes readily apparent. Again, here we are, and here's Olliville, Kentucky. This lead is from Olliville, Kentucky. This is a mining operation that is of the time period. It kind of struck us as odd because Missouri is where most of the lead in North America is coming from at the time period. So we go to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and we say to the archivist there, where did the United States government get the lead that they gave to Meriwether Lewis? If you think that Meriwether Lewis got essentially a blank check from Thomas Jefferson. He was able to raid the storehouses. He went to the Office of Public Stores, which is the precursor to the Quartermaster General. So when we show up at the National Archives, we say, we think we have lead from Olliville, Kentucky, and Lolo, Montana, and we want to know where did the United States government get the lead that they gave to Meriwether Lewis. And we got really lucky with the archivist with whom we worked. She went above and beyond the call of duty and kept thinking of any way we could search the collections. And eventually we struck out. We were not able to find what we were looking for. We looked at receipt books, tax registers, or you name it. Eventually what she surmised is that we were probably looking for a document that was destroyed by the British attack of Washington, D.C. in the War of 1812. As the Quartermaster General, this collection should be very robust. But right up until 1812, it's a pretty sparse collection. Now that doesn't mean the documents don't exist, they just don't exist in the National Archives. So we're not able to close the loop from the United States government to Meriwether Lewis. But that doesn't mean that the lead isotope analysis didn't help us. This is England. Hudson's Bay Company was in Lolo Creek time period indicated by the carbon-14 analysis. This is not English lead. That's important. Hudson's Bay Company doesn't support the local economy. They bring their own lead with them. So we know that the fires and the campsite that we're seeing here is not the Hudson's Bay Company. Again, back to trying to disprove the theory. So then we got this wild hair, and we thought, well, let's take a look at Fort Clatsop. Here we are. Here's Olliville, Kentucky. This is Fort Clatsop, a lead ball that was recovered. There's no correlation between what we have and what was recovered there. There's more work that needs to be done on this, and to the Park Service credit, they recognize that, they're stepping up to that, they're funding a master's thesis project on this. Jamie, the woman who wrote this part of the report on the lead isotope analysis, is going to become the resident expert. And then this thing pops out of the ground. This comes from the same location as the lead. It's the same location and depth as the fire. We took this over to Tom Ford in the anthropology department. And if you know Tom, he doesn't generally get excited about much of anything these days. He got excited about this thing. It's been years since I've seen Tom get that excited. We put the bead under a microscope. The bead's been burned, it's been used. It is the big blue. You run it through the classification system. It's of the time period. But again, back to the historical record, nobody really knows exactly what kind of bead Lewis and Clark had with them. If this bead was by itself, there would be some serious problems with trying to say that this is a Lewis and Clark artifact. It's the same problem we had with the button when the button came out of the ground. Now, to address the button, we went back to where the button was recovered. We put 3 excavation units in the ground. And to an archaeologist, those are a lot of holes. We didn't find anything. I mean, literally, we put 3 dry holes into the ground. And after the 3rd dry hole, one of the archaeologists on my staff, we're sitting there talking about this, and he points out to me, he says, you know, Dan, the absence of data is telling you something. And Eric's absolutely right. There's nothing here to suggest that that Tomback button is a Native American trade good. There should have been a flake or a chip or a tool or something there that would tell me that that button was associated with the Native Americans, but there's not. I know the button's historic in origin. I don't believe that it's associated with the Native Americans. In the research that Bill had undertaken, we find the homesteading that had occurred in Lolo Creek. It's almost 7 years after the button was manufactured. So the button's not associated with the historical development of Lolo Creek. And you can see where this argument is going. The button by itself, there's some problems with it. But when you look at the button in context with the bead, when you look at the button and the bead with the lead, when you look at the button and the bead and the lead with the fire, and then add the latrine in there, all of a sudden you begin to see that there's an incredible amount of information here that's in the ground. Now, that's not to say that there weren't problems. There's the irrigation pipe that Ernie put in the ground. It's a 4-inch diameter pipe, about 3.5, 4 feet in the ground. Now, when we did the research design, we thought that there were roughly 60 anomalies that we wanted to see what they were. We got to 18 of them. But there were huge areas where we couldn't really see much with remote sensing. There are limitations to what this science or this technology can do for you. This is a good illustration of, this is, again, a 20 meter by 20 meter square, and it's pretty much obscured on the western edge. We don't know what's there. When you think about the sheer amount of information that came out of the ground, the latrines, fires, that are of the proper time period, they're in the proper arrangement, the bead, the button, the lead, all of these things. We've really just scratched the surface here at Travelers Rest. There's a laboratory sitting right out here that's just begging for somebody to knock on the door. There's an incredible amount of opportunity here for future work. This is what we're proposing to the National Park Service, is the new boundary. And as of last week, once again, they keep changing their minds on what to do here, but that's okay. We're going to dispose of the old NHL boundary that you saw, and this is what we're going to propose. In our conversations with the Park Service, initially they were kind of thinking, well, I don't know, you've got associations with Lewis and Clark, I'm not real sure about the archaeology, and then the more and more we talked about the archaeological record that's here at Travelers Rest, they've come around full circle now, where the people in Washington, D.C. are saying, yes, this represents a major theoretical advancement of our understanding of the Lewis and Clark expedition. If we take this to Clatsop, we take this to Weah Prairie, can we see von Steuben's fingerprints in the ground like we do here? These are great research questions, and I think it's an entirely valid approach. So we're going to end tonight with the chapter. The story starts and ends with them. In this project, we have seen the birth of a new nonprofit. Depending upon your perspective, there are lots of nonprofits who are either littering the landscape or they're populating the landscape. The Turf organization, the Travelers Rest chapter, these two groups, if you found yourself in a position where you want to do something to help a nonprofit out, either one of these is just a wonderful group. I would highly recommend either one. In my 20-plus years in historic preservation, I've never seen anything like this. And it's really heartwarming to know that people of Montana really care about their resources. They're interested in seeing them preserved. They're interested in seeing it interpreted. And they're interested in seeing it done in a proper fashion. And to that end, this project has been absolutely wonderful. So at this point in time, we're going to open up to any questions. I want to introduce my team. Jamie and Susan, you're here, I believe. I saw you. Please. Stand up. Yeah. Stay here. They work for me and they tolerate my behavior from time to time. And I thank you guys for what you've done. And Jamie, you can get your pieces. Thanks. Kevin McCann, Cartographics. Kevin did that. We got a lot of positive feedback on the map when we were in St. Louis. Everyone was really impressed, and I'm just tickled pink. Me too. Natalie Merle. Natalie, you're here. Natalie had the unenviable task of the mercury analysis, and so as we're excavating, and keep in mind that archaeologists are not very clean people, and we're kind of crude, and we enjoy that. And she's having to work in close proximity to this. And as we're jumping out of the excavation, and she's jumping in, and she's testing, and then we're like, okay, get out of our way, we need to go down. She pulled it off like a trooper. She did the write-up on the mercury analysis, and a wonderful piece of work. Skip Higgins, where is Skip? There he is. I don't think many people in the chapter are aware of this, but after Bruce found that button, Skip and I went back. Skip had a low-grade magnetometer, and we're literally out there dodging construction as the backhoe's going at it, and they're putting that septic system in. We started to find things that the metal detectors have missed. And that, to me, was a key moment in saying we need to come back with a higher resolution magnetometer and take a look at that. Skip just told the chapter, forget the bill on that, we'll deal with the Travelers Rest later. You saw the results that Skip did out there. What magic. With absolutely astounding work that he did. Will Babcock, please. The finest historians that I've had the privilege of being associated with over these many years. Jamie and I had taken first whack at von Steuben, and we talked to quite a few folks about it. And we went to the university and talked with Ken Lockwood. We talked to other folks around the country. And then we took this and then turned it over to Bill. And I surveyed the literature along the Lewis and Clark Trail, and I'm biased, granted. I can tell you that the chapter that Bill put together on von Steuben, the military aspect of the expedition, is unequal. It's bar none. Thank you, Bill. So, there is our project team. There is our results. We did go through the peer review process. It was a challenge, to be nice. No, actually, the peer review strengthened our product. We had some problems, but in the end, we came out better because of it having gone through it. It's amazing to me the people around the country and along the trail that know about Travelers Rest and what's going on here. I was in St. Louis recently and gave a presentation on Travelers Rest at a conference. And I got a chance to meet with the people at the Missouri Historical Society who put the National Lewis and Clark Bicentennial Exhibition together. And as a sidebar, that's a great exhibit. You get a chance, go to that show. It's an eye-popper. It's a great museum show. But everybody knows about what's going on here at Travelers Rest. And I think that's a good thing. And that gives us a real, for lack of a better word, that gives us a real pregnant moment here in time that we can cash in on. And Lauren is positioned in a great place right now. There's excitement that's generated. He's got a huge monumental task ahead of him. And how does Lauren and the Turf Review take that excitement and turn it into something on the ground? We knew 8 years ago that we were going to be creating an 800-pound gorilla and dropping it in the middle of Lowell. Good luck. Are there any questions? Okay.
Dan, the designation I saw on the slide, are you including the Miller property?
Yes.
Okay, I thought it looked like it. And plus all the way to Opal, or the cross street that comes in.
No, we're using property boundaries now. It used to be in the old days that you put an X on a map and then you put a circle around the X, and that was the buffer zone. Now, the first wants property boundaries to be used as designation. And we do that because Button came off the Miller property. Now, there's been construction activity there, but there's still things in the ground there that tell us that this is part of the site needs to be included in the boundary. Now, we also included the property that was purchased by Ralph and Wendy Coolber. And when you look at Bob's work, he talks about the level plain that's next to the campsite. That was the location of the foot races and horse races with the Nez Pierce. So you've got to include that within your boundaries. You can't deny the racetrack, if you will. So that's our justification for the boundaries. That's it.
Bill Bass.
Would the encampment rules be followed for just a one-night encampment along the trail?
That's a good question. We don't know for sure. I've never heard any reference to it. Indeed, in the literature on Lewis and Clark, you almost never encounter any reference at all to taking them along Van Stuyven, for example. I've encountered 2 professional historians that have assumed that they took it. And before I encountered those 2 historians, Dan and I simply assumed that they had taken Van Stuyven's regulations and the Articles of War. Whether they use them every encampment, though, I don't know. It seems to stand to reason that they certainly use them for those sites where they stayed probably 2 days or more. I don't know how many campsites there are numbered along the trail in the hundreds. Somebody in the chapter here I'm sure knows. I don't know if they use that formation, that spread every time. I can't answer you one way or the other.
Bill's a little more hesitant than I am. I think, and it's my opinion, that of course they follow Von Steuben every day. When you look at Von Steuben's strictures for military rank and the duties of each officer, when he gets down to the captains are to keep daily journals while they're in the field. Now, I submit to you, does that sound vaguely familiar at all? Well, of course they're following Von Steuben every day. They're writing in the journal. This is what Von Steuben is telling them to do. But then again, that's just my opinion. And as Bill pointed out, there's not a lot of proof. We're beginning to see a lot of scholarship on this topic, which is really exciting. The museum in St. Louis, the National Lewis and Clark Bicentennial, I had a chance to be there for the grand opening, and the third exhibit when you walk in is Von Steuben, Rules and Regulations. And you could have knocked me over with a feather when I saw that. I was just dumbfounded. Here's another scholar that's coming to Von Steuben and pointing at it and saying, this is a valid interpretation of the history of Lewis and Clark. And we had absolutely no idea what she was up to, and she didn't know who we were. Great serendipity. There's another one over here.
Is there any reference in the journals to Lowell Hoskins at all? That would be a place that they would
No, we haven't. No, we're trying to figure this one out.
Just that then?
Yeah, there are references in the journals about the hot springs themselves. Back here?
Was that an actual copy of a journal that Clark used, that Mr. Clark is using?
Yes.
Are those, could you find one? Would one of us be able to go out and find one somewhere?
Yeah, that's the beauty of what the chapter's done. All of these things the University of Nebraska Press put out, and the journals are now available to everyone. They're available online. You can go buy a book. That's book right. In the back here?
Thanks for the presentation. I just have a comment about the mercury. I'm curious, is there any other possible source of mercury at that time? I know, like, later in the 1860s, for example, gold miners used mercury to separate the gold, and it's quite commonly used then. But is your analysis able to differentiate between, say, the 60-year period between later gold miners and the earlier use by Lewis and Clark again? I mean, I can't think of any other place where mercury comes from except those two sources myself.
But that's a good question, and there are two answers to that question. The first part is, Bill went out and looked at the historical record, how much mining activity occurred in Lolo Creek. And not only mining, but you need the presence of mercury amalgamation, and that's the key. Is there mercury amalgamation that's going to leak out and get into the creek and be transported downstream? And the answer is no. And the second question is the sampling program that we undertook. From across the landform, from that huge area, there's no mercury out there at a distance from the Niceville, if you will. If it was associated with mining or if it was associated with agricultural development property, it'd be everywhere. When you talk to the folks at Fort Placid about their results, and they've got mercury everywhere, there's no rhyme or reason to what they're finding. They think they're looking at industrial contamination.
Thank you.
Again, I was just wondering if you're going to compile all of the notes and diagrams and maps into one complete research document, book or something, so you can always go through it all in one go.
Are you sure?
Not everything.
It would be a terrible read, or terribly boring. I shouldn't say that. Those guys wrote most of it. Yeah, the question is, what are we going to do with this now that it's done? I don't know. We've been so focused on tonight and getting this project done that we haven't really addressed that question, but I know that that question is coming.
So if you do get the grants to do further research, you're looking for other cards.
That's my question. There are 3 fires in the report site. We've got 2. You probably have a third one, but it was Wagon. There's a lot of area where we think that the third fire should be, but it's obscured by the irrigation activities. And maybe it has been destroyed, but man, wouldn't that be nice to find? The lead. There's a lot more questions out there. One of the strictures that Von Stoyman throws out is that in keeping a clean camp, you're taking the animals that are the core butchers. You're going to take them 50 paces from the camp out, and you have a central butchering area that's to be kept clean. Will phosphorus analysis help find that patch of bone long gone, but there should be a chemical trace that we can find. Is that another avenue of research? Sure, it's a great avenue.
Okay, in the infrared photos, TP ratings is somewhere up higher, and they go further west. Did you find any evidence at all of the Native Americans that count in the area?
Yes. The one fire heart that we excavated. But probably the more compelling information was when we did the magnetometer investigation. And the mag really chirps as you're walking along. It sounds like a little bird. And we're out where there was a high concentration of these anomalies that infrared picked up, and that mag starts to chirp. And it turns out the magnetometer is picking up an anomaly in the same location that the infrared had picked up an anomaly. Now that leads me to believe that what you're looking at is a TP ring with a fire in the middle of it. Now that doesn't tell us anything about Lewis and Clark. So in the research design, we said there's no need to excavate that. When we sat down with the Native American community and we discussed this very thing. And there's no need to dig the Native American side to prove Lewis and Clark are there.
Why did you choose carbon 14 to date with?
Sue?
Because that was the most distinctive way of dating the fire heart. Carbon 14 is a reliable, pretty much source of scientific method for dating of the composition of the ash containing carbon. And we used 2 different laboratories, so we had didn't just choose one.
Well, Sue went into the anthropology department and said, okay, what's the best in the country for C14? And that's why we went to Stafford. How they're expensive. This is why the other 2 samples went to Arizona State. No offense against Arizona, but money's money. Question?
Yes, we're talking about the lead that it came from, is it Kentucky? And you couldn't find any records at the National Archives in terms of the government purchasing lead from that source. Was there, do you think there's any way, or did you look at mining companies or lead companies, manufacturing companies in Kentucky, business records from that era, to see if there's any possibility of going from that route?
Well, that's a good question. It might be valid, but I think that would be a monumental undertaking. I had the chance to actually visit with the state historian from Kentucky at the conference I was at in St. Louis, and I said, we've got lead all over Kentucky, Lower Montana. And he looked at me like I just dropped off Mars. He'd never heard this technique. And he was just, confused that it could work. And he's like, well, Kentucky did clear out Montana. It does, it's here.
You said that the Lewis and Clark journals are available online. Is that like if I went to Google, or do I have to go through a database in the library?
Ken, do you know that? I don't. I've seen references that have been there off the top of my head. I couldn't cut it.
Several volumes of more. You can get to the Lewis and Clark journals, the Moulton edition, online. They, by going to the University of Nebraska Press, and you'll be led direct to that resource. Don't expect to find it all on now. They put a little bit of volume 4 on last year, and this month, what month is it? Within the past few weeks, they've begun systematically putting the journals on through a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. So, and I believe that their target is the end of the bicentennial. They're not putting them on all at once. It's a very complex process, and it'll be not just an e-book. There are illustrations, such as Gary has in his journal edition, and various types of files. So you have something to pursue for the next 2 years, 6 months, and 10 days.
Thank you.
You just reaffirmed my comment about public education.
How far below the surface did you find your lead?
10 to 20 centimeters was the hot zone.
10 to 20 centimeters.
10 to 20 centimeters. That's where the butt came from, the lead came from, the fire hearts, the blue trade bead. That was ground zero.
So is that too deep for a common metal detector that discriminates?
No, we did look with metal detectors. In fact, before we closed up the excavation units, Bruce Troop came out with his, and we probed the excavation units and found a few more lead objects. But we didn't want to recover the lead through that technique. We felt the controlled excavations on the fire heart, because stratigraphic principle is so important to an archaeologist. We need to know that stratigraphy, so that's why we wanted the excavations rather than metal detectors and pulling the hits out of the ground. But we did that differently over in the area of training, because stratigraphy is not important. It's more important to know what's there.
have a couple more pieces of business. He kept mentioning von Steuben. Francis, where are you, in the back? Francis Reagan is the one who pointed out Baron von Steuben to Dan. He's one of our chapter members. Just goes to show what we can all do if we put our minds to it. And Jack Fisher, where are you? Jack is one of our members. He's retired. He worked all summer with Dan for free. With volunteering his time. Dan mentioned, Jimmy over here asked the question, what are you going to do with your materials? How many of you want Dan to write the book so we can all read it? It has been highly suggested to him that he cooperate with a writer and change the language so we can understand it a little and get it out there for us. And I would be the first to buy your book, Dan. But you have to autograph it for me. I'm lucky, 2 of my daughters actually were able to work with him through the summers. So it's a great thing for kids to do too. We have somebody who would like to say something. Ready, Pat?
I just wanted to say I can't believe how far this has gone since Chuck and Terry Heath came to our house to tell us what they thought. And we had thousands of people. We have over 4,000 people, but we were still there. And what an opportunity to meet all of those people and how much the chapter has been so dedicated and worked so hard. And I think we really owe them a big hand.
We have some more information. The house that you just bought down there, that's another little...
We affectionately call this the Lewis and Chuck expedition. A couple more quick things. We're going to have a little toast to Dan in a minute, but before that, Lauren Flynn, the director of the Travelers Rest State Park. We'd like Lauren to say a couple words. The chapter has done its part and will continue to. Dan has done his part and will continue to. Now it's time for all of you to do your part.
I know we've been thanking a lot of people here tonight, but I think there's a couple more organizations we should always remember. Barb Paul and the National Trust for Historic Preservation have been long champions of this place and continue to be, and I think that they should be recognized. And the Richard King Mellon Foundation and the Conservation Fund who came in and preserved the site when we really needed it. And I think sometimes lost in the shuffle is also the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, who is willing to be innovative in establishing the relationship with Turpa and hanging on to this piece of property. So those organizations. And thanks to all of you for your perseverance and your dedication and your passion. And as we've heard tonight, now where do we go with this? And I find it very interesting. Dan's comments tie so very nicely with everything we try to do out of Travelers Rest. This is a place of amazing stories, and they're very personal stories. And I think any of you who visited the park and had a chance to visit with our volunteers and learn about the site are touched by that personal story. That shall continue. The things that have gone on at Travelers Rest have affected the world. And they stretched long before Lewis and Clark, and they will stretch long beyond our lifetimes. And that's what we're about creating there, is something, a legacy that goes on forever. And we can only do it with you and your passion, and your dedication, and your perseverance. Thanks very much.
Lauren, what are the hours of the state park right now?
8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Will be expanding in April.
Back to 7 days a week?
6 days a week in April, 7 days a week in May.
See, you have your chance. You can get there.
We have volunteer applications.
We're always looking for docents, people who'd like to learn about Travelers Rest and the state park in the area. And they do need help out there, and that's where we all get to fill in. I know tons of chapter members have been out there and done their part, the community folks. One thing to do. Richie, I need you to come up at this time. Chuck and George, you need to come up. And Francis. Dan? I just want to make sure you see some of the really important people. Captain Clark's been here for 200 years waiting for this. And Kim, who set up most of the decorations and I planned this, the color of the committee, has got us some champagne. But remember, we ran out of grog near the Great Falls, so we don't have a liquor license. I don't think this is really real. But Dan, where you go? Come on. Francis for telling Dan about von Steuben. Chuck for being one of the founding members and president for 6 years and for all you've done. And George for your wisdom in creating the trunk and the brigade. The chapter and everybody would like to thank you. And I think Captain Clark has a toast he's going to give us.
Yes, Dan, it's very much an honor to congratulate you. And I'm disappointed you're not interested in a book. Mr. Jefferson has asked me to inquire for his library. I'm sure he would find it keenly interesting. And but we can talk about this later. You know, I'm pleased to congratulate Master Daniel Hall. I, too, was an archaeologist, and you probably know. After the expedition, I did some digging at Big Bones Lick in Kentucky, where my brother George Rogers had done some digging years earlier for the bones of the mammoth. And I collected bones at natural history and curious animals in my museum in St. Louis. And if you ever come to St. Louis, I want you to visit my museum and perhaps me help me identify some of my objects. I have a coin from the Roman Empire given to me from out west, which is very curious. But I have something for you, Dan. I'm thinking perhaps a bottle of fine spirits. Some Scottish whiskey, I was thinking. You know how much a bottle of that is? So I thought, why not a bottle of fine Dr. Rush's Billy? As he called them, the Samson of purgatives. The Paxall disease. I would like to talk to you afterwards about their use. Now I have something else for you. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been asked a lot these days, and I get a lot of inquiries. Dan never did ask me, he didn't need my help on his dig. But that's all right, because I've forgotten a lot. But I've called from National Geographic wondering exactly what my hair color was. The Daughters of the American Revolution have called me wondering what exactly I used to carve my name in Pompey's Tower. And recently, Ken Korsniski has been contacting me. He has yet to find a latrine. As we called him, a sink. And he's interested in the camp just on the other side of the Bitterroot Mountains. It was our longest stay in one place other than our forts at what historians have called Long Camp, or Camp Traponish, is it? I'm not sure how they pronounce it. But I called it Six Sink Camp. And Ken Korsniski knows I have a very valuable map, a sink plan of that long stay. Ken Korsniski has offered me a substantial sum of money, which I cannot repeat. But no, Dan, I'm going to give this to you. You can see here I've marked off the 300 feet perimeter around our encampment there, and the location of the 6 sinks there. This sink we only stayed at 1 day. It was right next to a den of rattlesnakes. This sink here, we spent we used it for 9 days. We made it extra big because it had a great view. Captain Lewis and I did quite a bit of journal writing. But Dan, you know, perhaps this can help you to further glory. This is over the hills. You can see where I've marked my name. We were waiting for the snow to melt and delayed. And I marked my name, and Dan, you should look for this. I marked my name on a cliff here. I marked my name on an Indian lodge here. I had a little trouble for that. I marked my name on a boulder here, or a tree. Here's a boulder, I marked my name. Here I put my name in a bottle. Send it in the ocean, perhaps China. And here I peed my name in the snow. We have a lot of time to kill there. But I would like to toast Dan Hall, Master Daniel Hall, to a man who has given a renewed sense of meaning to the term that one man's trash is another man's treasure.
How many think Captain Clark held back on the grog from the men and possibly kept some for himself? I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. The chapter has splurged. We will have the high-definition television going here in a second. You can come around and see some of our traveling trunk, uniform, encampment, and we have lots of food in the back, and we have a cake with Dan's face on it. So we're going to see where that ends up. There's a Ranger pickup blocking someone's exit. A Bitterroot dealership license plate. Is that yours, Ann? Oh, man, Powell Ranger District strikes again. They have the power to block traffic. Oh, well. I see Hugh McNeil has gotten hold of the bottle. So all of you, please, we have food. If you don't eat it, we got to take it home. And we don't have enough refrigerator space. So please, eat, drink, and be merry. Thank you for coming.